Last night, Jewish siblings across the world celebrated the festival of Pesach, of Passover, the commemoration of liberation of the Israelites from bondage in Egypt, the crossing of the Reed Sea out into the desert, into the unknown, and headed towards a promised land. And the time between the Exodus, leaving the bondage in Egypt, and arriving in the promised land was not, according to the story, a short amount of time. 40 years in the desert of the Middle East. You can imagine the kinds of complaints that must have arisen for the Jewish leaders. Indeed, some of those are cataloged in Hebrew scriptures. Some folks even complaining so far as to say it would have been better that we had died in bondage in Egypt than be out here with y'all. Because being together is hard. Getting people into the same room to agree on one thing can be challenging. Whether you're in the desert saying, I think we should go this way, or saying, I think we should go that way. I'm tired of hearing this guy talk. Why won't she listen more? That's a lot to deal with for anyone. And that time of wandering and the time of feeling lost is part of a Jewish national story, but it's also part of a human story. The trauma of being disconnected and feeling listless, of not knowing which way to go, not knowing what to do. That's part of our human story as well. That when things are hard, when changes are happening quickly and we don't feel like we have control, when we feel unmoored, we can feel like we are wandering in the desert. And it is very human and very easy to look for someone or something to blame. In the story of the Exodus, the Hebrew people often turn their blame towards the God of Israel, often pronounced Yahweh, the divine name. As Sandy said, that story ends with finding a home, but then that home is eventually divided into two kingdoms throughout history. And the prophet Micah comes along to answer the same question that people seem to be asking. Should we go this way or that way? And in the ancient Israelite conception of theology, they seem to be asking the question, what does God want us to do? A God who liberated the people from bondage, what does God want us to do? Which way does God want us to go? Another way to ask this question, in a more humanistic sense, is to say, how do we go from surviving one day to the next to thriving and living out our full and unblemished lives, to fully bloom into this humanity? The Hebrew leaders asked the question, were we saved from bondage to simply survive, or for something more, to thrive? I think Micah's famous verses are an answer to this question. And as Sandy mentioned, Micah seems to have a law background because he sets up most of the chapter as a kind of trial, of putting the God of Israel on trial, in fact. But the witnesses that are called are not just people. They are, in fact, the mountains and the hills and the very foundations of the earth. And Micah is calling out to this divided people, bickering with one another about what to do. What is God's will? What does God want from us? And ask the Hebrews to see the bigger picture. Remember the Exodus from Egypt. Remember the Passover celebration. Remember the crossing over into Jordan, crossing over the Jordan into the promised land. That survival demands focusing on 1 minute to the next, simply one day in the desert to the next. Micah asked the question, are we made to survive or to thrive? To live in a state of scarcity mindset or one of abundance? Do we bicker about which way we should go when things are not exactly as we want? Or do we find a way to come together? So, what does God want, according to Micah? What does it take to thrive, to live well, to be fulfilled? Rabbi Simlai said that Moses, the great Hebrew leader, was given 613 precepts about how to act, not just the 10 commandments that we might be familiar with, but a lot of other ones. 613. 365 of them were thou shalt nots. Don't do this. The rabbi said that Micah has made it simple for us, reduced it to three. Three to thrive, to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly. Sandy's explained the clarity of the first two, to do justice and to love kindness. And to walk humbly has a few different meanings. The word to walk humbly could also mean to walk modestly, with your head bowed, in awe of the wonder around you, in awe of the mountains and hills and trees and forests and the air that we breathe and the stars that flame in the sky. It could mean to walk wisely or carefully, being aware of the impact we have on others and how we are interconnected in an interdependent web of existence. And it could mean to walk completely, fully. I'm struck by the comparison to walking this path to something like the 12 Steps program of AA and the support group of Al-Anon. That the move from wandering in the desert, you have no control, towards leaning on the God of your own understanding, as Micah says, your God. That move from dependence and survival, one minute to the next, towards a thriving and abundant life. From scarcity to abundance, from fear to hope. I think that's the move Micah is describing here. I think it's something we can all take to heart regardless of our theologies. To do justice, to love kindness or mercy, and to walk humbly, modestly, knowing we don't have all the answers, knowing we're not perfect, but trying to do what we can for the greater good, for the greater God, to walk completely. For those who are in the program, to follow through all the 12 steps, to walk completely into a full and abundant life. For the Israelites wandering in the desert, to walk completely through the 40 years into the promised land. For us as UUs, what does that mean here today? To walk completely. I think about our covenant. And I think about the Hezekiah Walker song, I Need You to Survive, that we often sing. I need you to survive. Maybe. I think the message of that song is not that I need you to survive, because people can survive on their own, more or less. But to thrive, I think we need each other to thrive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to thrive. I pray for you. You pray for me. We are all a part of God's body. It is God's will that every need be supplied. You are important to me, and I need you to thrive. Isn't that our covenant? Isn't that what we say about the diversity here at Restoration? that we need each other to thrive, that we need each other to learn from and lean on and hold one another. Micah sets up this legal situation to put God on trial, to confront the scarcity mindset of the Hebrew people, and finds that we are held by a love greater than anything we could imagine. So, how do we respond to that love? God has told you, humanity, what is good. How should you respond? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly, carefully, completely with your God and with one another. When we say that we will abide by our covenant, I think it is the holiest thing that we do here. To be held by love with a capital L, and to say that we will not abandon one another. When we disagree about which way we should go, what does God want from us? Who gets to speak and who does not? To remember the universal message of a story like Passover, that we were not called into this place to merely survive, but perhaps for something more. That the goal of religious community, as I believe, the goal of beloved community, is thriving individuals and thriving communities of liberation, a word that we've been throwing around a lot. Liberation from all kinds of chains, as our first hymn spoke of. Liberation from the oppression, both of physical bondage, as in the case of the Israelites, as in the case of Black Americans, as in the case of all people of color in this country undergoing oppression from white male terror. And liberation from the ideas and things that cause that fear and anger that produces that terror. Because to wander in the desert is scary. And it's easy to lean on the trauma of feeling lost. I find it helpful when I feel unmoored to remember my covenant, the covenant I believe in, the God I believe in, the love I experience, to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly. I'm honored to do it with all of you. May we heed Micah's counsel, the three to thrive. May we move from surviving to thriving and hold one another in love. May we do so, and may it be so. Amen.